Well, hi everybody. Welcome to this preview webinar of the Profiler Training Certification course. My name is Joel Markwitt.
And I'm Antonia Dodge.
And I just want to go over real briefly the schedule, kind of the framing of how this event is going to work. And then we'll just jump right into it. So after this introductory period, we'd like to go into some content. And Tony is going to teach some specific content around the system, around the profiling system, so that you can go away with understanding a little bit of an overview, but also it's applicable in your life and your personality. So when you end this webinar today, you're going to have some great content to take back dealing with how to develop your personality. So we're going to talk about that, and then we're going to talk a little bit about the content of the actual event, of how profiler training is structured and the way that that program looks. We're also going to talk about the schedule and logistics. We'll talk about some bonuses and the tuition payments, and then we're going to open up for question and answer. So that's basically the structure of how this program tonight is going to go for you watching. And before we get into any of that, we invited a few of our former students on to give some feedback, to give some testimonials of their experience. You can hear from real live people like yourself that have gone through the Profiler Training Certification course.
So we invited our friends to come on, people like Joel mentioned, old students of the Profiler Training Certification course. We've had about somewhere between 55 and 60 students go through over the last couple of years, and this is just a handful of them. So we wanted to invite them on, and we wanted to give them an opportunity to give their testimonial right away, so that you can kind of get an impression of the value that it's had in other people's lives, to get, kind of a gauge on whether or not this is intriguing, if this is interesting, if this is something that you truly want to pursue, because it is an investment. So we wanted to first ask our friend, Ivan, are you there?
I'm here.
Okay, great. Ivan, we just wanted to get some impressions that you've had, or that you had during Profiler training. Now, you were in one of our first classes a couple years ago, and I want to check in and find out, first of all, what is your personality type? How do you use this? How frequently do you use the system? And then a couple other impressions that you have of having gone through Profiler training.
Yeah, so it's been really a game changer for me. I run an aerospace manufacturing company, so on a daily basis, I am utilizing the system with my people and with myself, and optimizing my role as well as other people's roles. I'm an ENTJ, and so the Profiler training course really gave me a lot of acceptance for myself and how I do things and how I go about things, and things that I would beat myself about in the past became accepted for myself, and I could really feel more comfortable in my own skin. And also I had a difficult relationship with my father and my son, who are kind of on opposites to me in terms of personality and how they go about things, and which used to drive me really crazy. And that has been really a game changer, because there's so much more acceptance, and there's so much more, I value them more, and I'm able to hear them better, and I'm able to relate with them so much better, and on a larger scale. I use it with my customers. I use it with my vendors. I use it with my employees. It's been really huge. So overall, I don't think that it's been a kind of an opening, and it's really enabled me to own my strengths, and enabled me to take them to a higher level, and it also enabled me to accept the things that I'm naturally not the strongest in. So, and then to be able to manage them and work with them and develop in a way. So, it's been really super valuable, and I would recommend it highly to anyone who's thinking, if this is going to be, is this going to be a good experience? Absolutely. Every part of the process was engaging. Joel and Antonia run an amazing course that is supportive, that they will work with you in depth and on a personal basis, and so I would really recommend it very, very highly.
Thanks, Ivan.
Yeah, that's awesome. So basically what you're saying is that at this point you use it daily because you're using it in your business, you're using it in your personal life, you're in your family life, you're using it to understand yourself. So effectively, the content that you learned in Profire training is something that you use on a daily basis.
Absolutely. I mean, I cannot not use it. It's pretty much impossible.
And what was the experience of going through the actual course? I know you said it was a good experience, but
so specifically, I really dove in, and it was very, very interesting to me, and the content was very engaging, and I would look forward to the weekly session, and there was always something that would pop up in life, and then I would get my questions answered, and it was kind of an unfolding. The way the content was presented was super interesting, and also the demeanor in which you go about it and how supportive you are of everyone really was very special. I've given this feedback before. I felt like this was one of the best courses that I've ever taken in terms of how the presenters approached the students, and so it was super fun, and it was extremely valuable.
So then I'm assuming that it's going to be yes, but just to go a little more granular, would you say that it was a good time investment as well as a good financial investment?
Yeah, absolutely. It was, like I said, it was a lot of fun. There was this wasn't something that you're going to grind through. You're going to enjoy it all along the way, and you are going to be changed for the better. And it's going to be exponentially valuable in your life as you go on.
Do you have any specific examples, quickly, if you can think of any? I know we're kind of putting you on the spot by asking this, of how you've used it since you went through Profire training, of using it in a very specific context or a specific example, a story you could share.
Yeah, well, specifically, my father and I took over a family business, and when you take over a family business, you gotta live into some other people's viewpoints, and so I had a lot of difficulty living into something that my father created, and he created it in his own way, which is completely opposite the way I would go about it. So I had a lot of pain with having to be someone else practically, and
Sure.
that has been a huge difference maker for me, so that I can continue to exist in my own way and stamp my own way of doing things, and make peace with the way he does things, and be able to communicate in a way that I can be heard, and that I can build the company from here and gain the trust and permission to do that has been truly amazing. And I had the tools to be able to reach my father, and the language to be able to reach him, and to make that happen. So that's just one of the examples. The other example is with my son, was again the opposite of me. So I was kind of in a sandwich between two generations, and it's been hugely beneficial.
Awesome.
Well, all right.
To be able to people who I love the most, who are the most important to me, I had the most difficult relating to. Mm-hmm. So being able to relate to them, to the people you love the most, and to be able to build those relationships in the best way, I mean, it's priceless. I can't tell you enough how much it's changed my life.
Thank you, Ivan, for
That's
coming
so
on,
awesome.
letting us know that.
Yeah, thank you for giving such a fantastic testimonial.
Thank you. You want to go to Kelly?
Yeah.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Ivan. We'll talk to you in a little bit. Kelly, are you there?
Yeah, hi guys, how are you?
Good.
Good. How are you tonight, Kelly?
Good, thank you.
Cool. All right, so we're going to basically ask you the same series of questions. Can you give your personality type, and then can you give us a little bit of an overview of your experience going through Profire training, how often you use it, what are some of the big ahas, and, well, maybe I should go one at a time. First of all, what's your personality type?
Well, I'm an INFJ, and I originally was typed wrongly, mistakenly, in two different personality types by just taking online tests and the Myers-Briggs personality indicator test, and neither one of them resonated for me. So when I finally got hooked up with you guys, and Antonio, you suggested that maybe I was mistyped, it all came together for me. So it was really valuable just in understanding the value of the system that now worked for me as opposed to before. So it was a great, just that first couple weeks in the program was pretty transformative.
What were some of the big ahas that came out of, well, actually, first let me ask you, what was your experience like going through the program? Like what was your relationship with going through the content?
I ate it up, basically. I loved every minute of it. I couldn't wait every week to have our weekly lessons and sessions. And the homework was awesome because it really solidified all the concepts and really helped me get in touch with how, even if they weren't my main functions, how I used all of the cognitive functions somehow in my life. So it was a great process.
And at this point, how often, like what you learned in the program, how often do you implement or utilize the information that you learned?
I'm exactly like Ivan in that regard. I use it all the time. It's become second nature. When I'm meeting somebody, or even somebody that I already know, it's like I said, second nature to just watch each of the cognitive functions in their lives, and it helps me to speak the language that they best understand. And so I think just on that level alone, it's helped kind of bridge the language gaps between some of the different types and my own.
What was one of the biggest ahas that came out of the program for you?
Probably that I naturally speak a language of the intuitive part of the personalities, and most of the world doesn't speak that language, and so I've had to kind of get by feeling my way around by trial and error to speak a sensor language, and that when I'm not really understood, when I'm not really accepted fully for how I state things or how my brain works, it means that I can't make the world change to match my own way of being, and sometimes the world is not going to accept my own style. So I have to be able to speak the language that they speak. It's like going to Germany and expecting everybody to speak English, which actually they probably do, but having a German come here and expecting everybody to speak German,
right.
they're going to have a harder time. So they have to learn to speak English if they
Sure.
are going to expect to communicate with people. So it's much like that analogy for me.
Would you say that it was a good investment of both time and money for you?
Oh, yeah, well worth it.
Of course she's going to say yes.
Yeah.
She's on here with us.
Yeah, I would.
Like, that's the whole reason we have her on here, right?
Yeah.
But
No,
it's good to
yeah.
hear it from you, though. Anyway, it's a formality.
But you did not have to twist my arm. I mean, as soon as you said that you were doing this, I really wanted to be here because I believe in the way you teach this and just your whole genius style system.
Yeah.
As differentiated a little bit from Myers-Briggs. So I'm happy to say it was very worth my time, very worth my money, and I would highly recommend it to anyone that asks me.
Now, Ivan runs an aerospace engineering company. What are you professionally trained as?
I'm an architect and interior designer, and I specialize in healthcare projects. So I'm dealing with a very different personality type on a daily basis between my clients and what used to be my coworkers. I've gone on my own now since I started this program, but yeah, so that's what I do.
Cool.
Awesome.
All right. Well,
Thanks, Kelly.
anything else you want to say about it, or should we just bow to you like we did to Ivan for giving us such an awesome testimonial?
Well, actually, there is something that I would like to make as an analogy, and it's kind of using the Joseph Campbell model, where in the hero's journey, you go on a quest and you have all these experiences, and then you bring back what he calls the elixir to society. And I think that that was my experience of this whole process. And I've explored other personality models also, and I just am really into a lot of different ones, but this one in particular is like that hero's journey, where you're sort of exploring that final frontier of yourself, and what you do bring back as that elixir really helps to heal not only your own perceptions of how you make your way in the world, but how your relationships work. And, you know, on a grander scale, you actually contribute to healing the whole of society, I think, by just working on yourself. And this is one of those fringe benefits of doing this work. So I just wanted to kind of make that analogy.
That was an awesome analogy, which I am instantly tagging to steal and put on our website. Personality hacker, the elixir you bring back. That's awesome.
It's good stuff.
Thank you so much, Kelly.
Thanks,
Thank
Kelly.
you very much for being with us and giving us an awesome
Absolutely.
testimonial. We really appreciate it.
Dylan, are you there?
Do I have
I
to
am.
unmute
Hey, guys.
Dylan? Oh, there he is.
He's there. Hi, man.
Hey, guys. How are you?
So we'll ask again, I guess. You've kind of been here with us enough to know that we're going to ask you your personality type. What personality type are you?
I'm INFP.
Okay. And when you went through the Profiler training course, certification course, what was it like for you? What was the experience?
It's utterly fascinating. For me, I have kind of a different experience than Isaac and Kelly. Like, I'm coming from a place of, to just be a little frank, kind of trying to put my life back together. So kind of a different, place, and it's just been incredibly helpful. One thing that's done is it's given me insights into who I am that are just really valuable. You guys have shown me a little bit about my place in the world, how I can have a positive effect in the world. And then also one of the things that you guys describe are some of the struggles of all the types, which is also incredibly valuable information. So anyway, it's been really fantastic.
Awesome. And going through the, as an INFP, what was the experience of going through the material itself, the sessions, digesting the material? Was it in a way that made sense to you? Could you resonate with it?
Yeah, absolutely. Antonia, you're a riot. I love your sense of humor. You guys have said this you guys said this in the class, but you really do have a profound gift for making it reachable for anybody. It's really easy to comprehend, and like Kelly and Isaac, I think, if I'm Ivan, sorry, paraphrasing him correctly, it has given me a frame change that I carry with me every day. It has changed the way I see the world in a really effective way. So.
Awesome. So would you say that it's a good investment?
Yes.
Awesome.
For sure.
Very cool. Anything final, any like major aha that was a takeaway that you now implement, or anything that was like really profound for you? I think you guys, all of you kind of touched on it as you were talking, but I just want to make sure that we don't cut you off if there's like one final thing you'd like to say.
I think, and it sounds like it's this way for all of us, but it's the frame change. It's being able to, for me, what I see going through it is that to me, this is my take, but it's an essentially tribal awareness. It's like there are 16 parts that fit together, and they're all necessary. They all have their strengths, they all have their weaknesses, and it really plays out. Like I can see it kind of the dynamics of the personality advantages and struggles, and the way we struggle to hear each other, the way we all sort of assume everybody else is like us, how it just kind of spills out into this world we have, and there you go. So that's what I see.
Thanks, Dylan.
Thank you so much.
We appreciate it. Thank you, Ivan, Kelly, and Dylan for giving us that feedback. So anytime Personality Hacker does something, we love to give content and we love to give great value. So we're going to jump right into some actual value and some content right now. And Tony's going to take the lead on this and deliver some stuff for you, some real good stuff. So hang tight.
All right, well, what we want to do is we want to make sure that you have a decent overview of the kind of thing that going through the Profiler Training Certification course can give you. We want to go through a bit of the system, but even for those of you who decide that Profiler Training isn't right for you, or it's not right at this time, or you want to think about it a little bit more, we want to give you something to walk away with at the end of this session that makes it so it was worth your time to show up tonight. And what I want to do is I want to walk through a webinar presentation that I made a little while ago called Making the Most of Your Personality. Know thyself, love thyself, optimize thyself. Now, when you go through the Profiler Training Certification course, you understand how to do basically what we're about to walk through. You understand how to do it for every single personality type. But those of you who maybe only know your personality type, or you may have gotten the Genius Style Assessment so that you have your PDF breakdown of what we call the CAR model. So you might have some familiarity with that. Those of you who don't know the CAR model, but have your Myers-Briggs type, you know what your Myers-Briggs type is. We're going to walk through what that CAR model effectively is and some of the highest leverage pieces of information that come from the CAR model. We're also going to dip in and out of what is called technical jargon in Myers-Briggs, or sort of the Myers-Briggs geek speak, because that's what we really dive into pretty hardcore in the Profiler Certification course. So Profiler Training is sort of a hybrid of the really technical academic stuff that it took me years and years and years to understand, and countless books and deep diving and going down the rabbit's trail for over a decade. We really try to bring it down to an extremely accessible place. So it's a combination of the accessibility of the model that we've put together, the Genius Style Assessment. As Kelly mentioned, it's built on the backbone of Myers-Briggs, but also kind of diverges from it just a little bit, enough to really understand some of the deeper dive portions. And we combine that accessibility of the Genius Style system with the really complex academic components of Myers-Briggs. And we put them together in a hybrid to make it so that when you leave Profiler Training, you actually know all the academic stuff. You know all that stuff that takes a lot of people a lot of years to figure out, but you also have built a language around a more accessible way of going about the system. And as we all know, accessible means that it's going to get into the hands of more people. It makes it a lot easier to use in your business. It makes it a lot easier to use in your coaching practice if you're a coach. It makes it a lot easier to use in communication. So we do sort of a mix between the two. And that's what I'm going to be doing tonight, is I'm going to be kind of dipping in and out of both. However, I'm going to primarily focus on the easier accessible stuff because, you might not go through Profiler Training and you might not need to know all the geek speak. So with that said, I really want to focus on this webinar presentation of making the most of your personality. All right, so just to break it down in its simplest form, there are 4 basic fundamental things that every person needs. And obviously this is a gross oversimplification, but you'll see how the building blocks of every component that we are, so the foundation of everything we are, comes into play in these 4 components that all of us need. The first thing is we need the ability to understand new information, right? Like that's called learning. We all need the ability to input information and be able to understand how the world works around us. We also need an ability to evaluate that information or determine its worth. In addition to those 2 things, we also need the ability to look within ourselves, right? To be able to kind of understand what's going on, to introspect, to, get in touch with who we are at the core of our being. And we also need a way to get real world feedback or engage with the outer world. These 4 different components to personality, we're going to, for the sake of this presentation, call our learning, our decision making, our introversion, and our extroversion parts. All right, so the ability to learn new information, learning. The ability to evaluate information or determine its worth is decision making, right? Because when we're evaluating, we're prioritizing, we're deciding whether or not this is good information for us or bad. And then that's what we use to act, right? Like we use decisions to determine whether or not we're going to act on the information we've just taken in. So we need a way to input and output. We need a way to learn and decision make. And that component of going and looking within ourselves, we're going to call that introversion. And the ability to get real world feedback or engage with our environment, we're going to call that extroversion. And these are the four fundamental components of all personality, are these four things that are necessary to all humans. If we're missing one of them, we are incomplete. That's the point. The point is that if we're missing any of these, we're going to be an incomplete person, and that makes sense, right? We all know somebody who loves to learn and cannot make a decision to save their life, right? So they waffle constantly. You're always like, just come down on a decision. And they're like, I can't, right? Because they love learning so much. And on the flip side, we also know there's people who are super decisive, get into action, and then end up making bad decisions because they didn't take in enough information in order to make a good decision. And we know there's people who are constantly living in a world outside of themselves. They never want to see anything inside because there be dragons, and they don't really feel like complete people. They have shallow relationships. They don't really know themselves, and they need more introversion or introspection in their life. And on the flip side, we know there's people who go in the ivory tower, won't interact with the outer world, hate outer world feedback, ignore anything that they don't want to have to see, and just use their own inner reality to create their total reality. And those people tend to be very frustrating because they won't input anything that they have not predetermined. So you can see how if you're missing one of these four components, you are not going to be a complete person. And this is the foundation of everything we're going to talk about tonight. Now, your driver process in the CAR model, and if you are not familiar with the CAR model, what I want to recommend that you do is take a piece of paper and a pencil out, and I want you to create 4 squares in like a quadrant. And so what I want you to do on the top left-hand quadrant, I want you to write above it driver, and the top right-hand quadrant, I want you to write co-pilot. Underneath the co-pilot, I want you to write, in the bottom right-hand quadrant, I want you to write 10-year-old. And in the bottom left-hand quadrant, I want you to write 3-year-old. The way that you're envisioning this is you are looking at your mind as a 4-passenger vehicle, because we have 4 basic components to our personality that are the most influential in us. And knowing what those are and knowing how they influence us is massive leverage. And what we're going to talk about first is we're going to talk about the driver process. Now, the driver process is what puts us into flow. It's the part or the component, the mental process that we use that makes us feel the best. We call it our driver because we love using it. The co-pilot process that sits next to it in the CAR model is a mental process, or what's technically called a cognitive function. It's a mental process that supplements and encourages our driver. It's a part of us that we basically need it in order to be a complete person, and you'll understand why in a moment. But that's in technical terms, they call it an auxiliary process, or a part of our personality that we definitely need in order to round us out. And then behind the driver and the co-pilot sit more childlike components to our personality. These are the mental processes that we're not engaging as often. They might not be as much on our radar, or we might just not have spent enough time developing them, and they're what we oftentimes refer to as our weaknesses. They're parts of who we are. They're cognitive processes that still influence us, but they're not as sophisticated as the 2 adults in the front seat, which are the driver and the co-pilot. Now, we're going to focus on the driver for just a moment. Your driver process, or that mental process, that cognitive function, it either learns information or it makes decisions. Okay, so the mental processes that we utilize to take in new information or inputs, they are by definition not going to allow us to decision make. That is not what they do. They only are learning. Or that driver process makes decisions, all right? Because those 2 things can't be happening at the same time. So when you make a decision, you are by definition outputting or acting or evaluating or prioritizing. You have ceased to take in new information because you are now at a decision point. So your driver process, depending upon your personality makeup, either learns new information or it makes decisions. It also is either introverted, helps you look within, or it's extroverted, and it seeks real world feedback. So your driver process is going to do 2 of those 4 fundamental things, all right? So the 4 fundamental things we talked about, 2 get knocked out by your driver process. Your driver is either learning new information or it's making decisions, and it is either introverted or it is extroverted. If you have your Genius Style assessment, please feel free to look at your driver process right now. So those of you who've gone through the Genius Style assessment on the Personality Hacker webpage or the website, if you've got your paid assessment, please have it in front of you so that you can reference what your driver process is. For those of you who don't have your premium content, haven't yet invested in the premium content on the website, I want you to refer to this incredibly ugly chart that I created in order for it to be seen, right? Like so that you can see it. Right? It's totally ugly. It's like colors, but find your personality type in the Myers-Briggs system. All right, I'm going to give you a moment to just kind of go through this chart. All the NF styles are in green, all the NT styles are in blue, all the SJ styles are in yellow, and all the SP styles are in red. These are what are called the 4 Kiersian quadrant styles, and we touch on that. We don't go too deep into this, but we definitely touch on it in the Profiler Training Certification course. All right. So has everybody found theirs? You know what your driver process is, and I want you to write down both the nickname, which is the first word, and the technical name, which is in parentheses. So if you are, say, an INFJ, Perspectives is the nickname, Introverted Intuition is the technical name. So just take a moment to write that down. All right. I'm going to keep going. All right, so if your driver process is one of these two processes, either exploration or sensation, then your driver learns new information. It does not make decisions. And it's an extroverted process, which means it receives real-world feedback but doesn't access the inner world. So if you're either an exploration or sensation person, then the two components of the 4 necessary or fundamental parts of your personality. If you're exploration or sensation driver, you've got the extroverted part of you handled and you've got the learning part of you handled. But in order to be a complete person, you need a way to make decisions and you need a way to access your inner world. If your driver process is perspectives or memory, then that means your driver learns new information. It learns new information and it goes inside. It is an introverted process. Again, you've got 2 of the 4 necessary components, but you don't have all 4. So that means that you need a way to make decisions and you need a way to go extroverted or get real world feedback. If your driver process is effectiveness or harmony, that means your driver makes decisions. It does not learn new information. And it is also extroverted. So it receives real world or outer world feedback, but it doesn't go into the inner world. And that means in order to be a complete person, then you need a way to learn new information and you need a way to go inside or to go into your inner world. And if your driver process is accuracy or authenticity, then your driver is also one of the processes that makes decisions, and doesn't learn new information, but it goes inside. It is introverted. So it gives you access to your inner world. And that means in order to be a complete person, you need a way to learn new information and you need a way to get outer world feedback or check in with the extroverted world. Okay, is this making sense? So depending upon your personality type, you're going to naturally come equipped with 2 of those 4 in that primary mental process. And when we say driver, I already mentioned that it's a flow state, but it's also the part of you that you identify with the strongest. It's the mental process or cognitive function that you really sort of, basically, if I asked you to describe yourself, you would spend 80% of your time describing this process, even if you don't know what it means. Even if you've never heard of Myers-Briggs or cognitive functions or mental processes or the CAR model, even if you've not heard of any of that, you will unconsciously begin describing the driver process using language that is all about that driver. You don't have to know any of this in order to follow that pattern. So your driver process is the part of you that you are the most identified with, and it gives you 2 of those 4, but it doesn't make you a complete person. So you desperately need a co-pilot process. So no matter what your driver process is, you need a co-pilot. That is absolutely imperative in order to get all 4 of those fundamental components to personality sort of ticked off and to become a complete person. So what your Copilot process does is it provides access to the world your driver cannot. Meaning that if your driver is introverted, your Copilot is automatically extroverted. And if your driver is extroverted, your Copilot is automatically introverted. That's why it balances you out. It gives you access to the world that the driver cannot. It also gives you balance to be a complete person in that it helps you learn new information if your driver is a decision-making process. And if your driver is a learning process, then your Copilot helps you make decisions. So with the two mental processes of your driver and your Copilot, you now have all four of the necessary basic standard components to personality. So why is developing your Copilot process the biggest bang for your buck developmentally? Now, this is what we're on about all the time. If you go into the Personality Hacker blog, you'll see me write articles about the Copilot process. If you've taken any of the Personality Hacker premium content or like the seminars and events we put on, I go on and on about the Copilot. I am always haranguing people about the Copilot and why it is so important. So why? Why is the Copilot the biggest bang for your buck developmentally? Why am I going on and on about it ad nauseum all the time? And the reason why is because you love your driver process. You spend all your time thinking, loving, making love to, snuggling at night your driver, right? Like I said, it is the part of you that you just naturally describe when people ask you to describe yourself. You identify with it the strongest. It's how you get into flow. It feels good. And by flow, we mean that state where you're doing activities where just by doing them, you get energy. It's where you feel your best. If you are out of your driver process for too long, you will go into a deep depression. And I've seen this pattern happen over and over and over again. When somebody is in a massively deep depression, one of the things, I mean, there are lots of different systems where depression could be the emergent. However, I have noticed that if they just change the one node in the system, that they're getting into their driver process more and more, they will get energy and they'll start getting juiced up by being in their driver. It's frequently when somebody doesn't think they have permission to be in their driver, right? The environment has told them somehow, somebody important to them or influential has said, you can't be in your driver process. That's wrong, wrong, wrong. And then that person goes, oh, I'm wrong and evil and bad, and now I can't be in my driver, and then they slip into a depression. Now, what's awesome is that going to your driver is a great way to get out of depression. It's a fantastic way to give yourself energy. However, we tend to overemphasize the driver mental process inside of our personality. And with your Copilot, not so much, right? Like, you like your Copilot. It's cool. You know that it's a part of you that's a strength. And, you know, you'll talk about, you know, if somebody asks you to describe yourself, you'll spend all this time talking about your driver. And then if somebody asks you questions about your Copilot, again, nobody has to know anything about these systems or models. They just, accidentally ask you questions that happen to refer to your Copilot. You'll say, yeah, I'm pretty good at that. I've got some strength in there. I've always been good at, say, like math or whatever your Copilot is focused on. So you'll enjoy using it. You'll have a natural talent using it. But it's not how you identify yourself. You won't use it as instinctively as you're going to use the driver. So developing it generally requires some conscious effort. It takes some work. It takes some self-discipline. It requires you to really focus in on exercising it. Now, I just want to make a distinction here. When I say the word exercise, I'm talking about something different than the word use, all right? We utilize things all the time. We will use our Copilot all the time, but that doesn't mean that we're exercising our Copilot. And the difference between using and exercising is the best illustration that I've heard is when you pick up a golf club and you've got a golf ball and you just kind of hit the golf ball with the golf club, that is using the golf club and it's using the golf ball. However, if you put like a 4-inch hole going so many hundreds of yards at the end of a green and you attempt to get the ball into the hole all the way, 200 or 300 yards or however it usually is in most golf courses, to get that ball into the hole, now you're exercising it. Now you've got a goal. Now you have to build some skill to really get your goal met. And that's what I mean by exercising it. We use our Copilot, but we don't always exercise it as well as we exercise our driver. We frequently like exercising our driver. Our driver's fun to use. We like giving it challenges. It feels good. And so we just naturally do that. But not so much the co-pilot. It doesn't feel as good to exercise the co-pilot like it does the driver. So I want you to look at your driver process again. Is it an introverted process? All right. And the 4 different mental processes, because there's 8 in total, the 4 different mental processes that are introverted are perspectives, memory, authenticity, and accuracy. All right. If that's the case, then you naturally prefer the world inside of yourself, and to venture outside is a little uncomfortable. So what's your co-pilot process? Well, if you are one of the 4 introverted styles that are the driver process, then your co-pilot process is going to be harmony, effectiveness, exploration, or sensation. And that means it's extroverted, right? We all balance ourselves out with the co-pilot. So if the driver is introverted, the co-pilot is naturally extroverted. And for those of you who have an extroverted process as your driver, either exploration, sensation, effectiveness, or harmony, then you naturally prefer the world outside of yourself. You like to explore the outer world. And inside, not so much, right? There be dragons inside. And so we don't, those of us who, I mean, obviously I'm an extrovert, right? I just scream extrovert as often as I can. For those of us who have an extroverted driver process, then when we go inside of ourselves, that's the terrain that's a little more uncomfortable. So your co-pilot process is going to be introverted. It's going to be either perspectives, memory, authenticity, or accuracy. And those are all introverted mental processes. So now I want you to check out what your 10-year-old process is. Now, those of you who are using the handy dandy chart, what I want you to do is I want you to take the, if you're using the handy dandy chart, I didn't write the 10-year-old process in that particular chart, but for those of you who've got your Genius Style Assessment, and those of you who don't, I want to highly recommend that you go check out the premium content with the Genius Style Assessment for your type. But those of you who have your Genius Style Assessment in front of you, I want you to check the 10-year-old process, which sits behind the co-pilot. Now, the 10-year-old process is going to be the exact opposite of that co-pilot. It's going to be the opposite of the co-pilot. And what that means is if your co-pilot is extroverted, then your 10-year-old is going to be introverted, right? Because it's the opposite of the co-pilot. And if the co-pilot is extroverted, wait, did I say that already? If the co-pilot is introverted, the 10-year-old is extroverted. And if the co-pilot is extroverted, then the 10-year-old is introverted, right? Whatever is what's technically called the attitude of the co-pilot, the 10-year-old goes to the opposite state or explores the opposite world, okay? Attitude effectively references whether or not something is introverted or extroverted. Attitude reflects or is referring to, it's a fancy $5 word to mean introverted or extroverted. So your co-pilot is going to be the opposite attitude of your driver, and your 10-year-old is going to be the opposite of the co-pilot. So basically what that means is your 10-year-old goes back to preferring the same attitude as your driver. Did I completely lose everybody? I'm going to check in right now with the chat room. Let me know if you guys are on board. Are you understanding what I'm saying? If your driver's introverted or extroverted, your co-pilot is going to be the opposite. And your 10-year-old is going to be opposite of co-pilot. So it's going to go back to having the same world preference as your driver. Making sense? Yes? All good here? Awesome. You guys are brilliant. Got it. Cool. All right. You guys are brilliant. So why is this so dangerous? All right. Why is this a problem? Why is it so dangerous that your 10-year-old goes back to being the same attitude as the driver? Well, your co-pilot and your 10-year-old process perform essentially the same function. So even though the 10-year-old is the opposite attitude of the co-pilot, it's going to actually be doing the same fundamental task as the co-pilot, meaning that both your co-pilot and your 10-year-old are going to be learning new information. So it's going to be exploration, memory, perspectives, or sensation. Or they both make decisions. So it's going to be harmony, accuracy, effectiveness, or authenticity. So even though the 10-year-old is the opposite attitude as the co-pilot, it's the same function as the co-pilot. So it's also going to be If your co-pilot is a learning process, your 10-year-old's a learning process. If your co-pilot is a decision-making process, then your 10-year-old is a decision-making process. But one is introverted and the other is extroverted. So different attitudes, but same function. And that's because they're the opposites of each other within that same function. So if you prefer the attitude of your driver process, which we all do, right? And you need to balance it with either learning or decision making, then it becomes extremely tempting to skip over your co-pilot process and instead use the 10-year-old to either take in new information or make decisions. Does that make sense? So if your driver is, say, extroverted and likes to learn new information, that means your co-pilot is introverted and likes to make decisions. Your co-pilot, however, will be extroverted and likes to make decisions. So if you want to stay in that world that you're comfortable with, for somebody like me who's an extrovert, that would be the outside world or the extroverted attitude, I'll skip my co-pilot and go straight to the 10-year-old to help me make a decision. So let's use me as an example, all right? Like as a fundamental example of how exactly that would look. My driver process is exploration. I'm an ENTP in the Myers-Briggs system. So that means that my driver process is exploration. And that's technically called extroverted intuition. So it's extroverted and it learns new information. And I love using exploration. It's my favorite process. I define myself by it. It puts me in flow, all the normal stuff for a driver. Extroverted learns new information. Now, my co-pilot is going to round me out by being introverted and helping me make decisions. All right, that makes sense. Our co-pilot is the thing that rounds out our driver in those 4 fundamental component parts of personality. My 10-year-old, though, is harmony, which is technically called extroverted feeling. So it's extroverted, but it also makes decisions, just like my co-pilot. So when I use my 10-year-old to make decisions for me, I end up acting self-centered and childish, all right? So my driver process and my 10-year-old process, which are both extroverted, which don't require me at all to look within myself and check in and see how I'm feeling as a person, right? Because there could be nasty stuff in there that like feels icky to me. I'll just stay in the outside world, in the extroverted world, and I'll use exploration to learn new information, and I'll use harmony to make decisions, right? So what that looks like for somebody of my type, or specifically me, is that I'm actually checking in with a child part of me to determine courses of action or to take action in the world, right? That's what that means. I'm using a 10-year-old part of me to make decisions. So obviously I'm going to show up a little childish. I oftentimes will use this, and people of my type, it's very frequent to use this when you're making decisions, to basically use a social component to make decisions. If people are not really understanding me on a social level, if I fear I've got a bad reputation, sometimes I'll just go with what other people want of me. And if I can't get what I want, my 10-year-old will get fussy, right? It'll get angry. Harmony is technically called extroverted feeling. It's about emoting. It's about extroverted feeling, right? Literally extroverted feeling going outward. Now, when people have this as a driver or co-pilot, they use it all the time. So they get to a point where they're not acting like a 10-year-old that's stomping its feet, right? They get really good at it, and they're using it in a lot more socially sophisticated ways. They're using it in emotionally sophisticated ways, and it shows up as a good process for them. But for me, not so much. If I skip my co-pilot process and I go straight to harmony, it usually looks like me fearing what other people think of me too much, making decisions based on reputation, explosions of emotion and emotional manipulation of others, and using anger as a weapon, right? Using anger as a weapon to get what I want. None of that's good stuff, especially if I'm in a personal development time period in my life and I don't want to show up like a child, right? Like I want to show up like an adult. I want to be a good person. I want to like do big things in the world. And if I get stuck in this sort of infanticized state in the 10-year-old piece, then I can't do that. I cannot show up as my best self. So for me, using my co-pilot to make decisions, that's when I'm consulting a mature voice. That's what helps me truly navigate the world. My co-pilot is accuracy. And so that means my check and balance system is radical honesty. All right. My value system lies in that co-pilot process of accuracy. It means that I'm going to develop, and I continue to develop, using analysis and reasonableness. So instead of explore, taking new information, have fun in the outer world, like push buttons and pull toggle switches, which is what exploration loves to do, in order to round me out, I use accuracy, which says, okay, but what is right? What do I think is a reasonable, analytical direction for my exploration to take? I check in with myself. I figure out what my values are. I'm radically honest with myself and others, right? Accuracy is very much about truth without any social component at all. Who cares what your reputation is? You're doing what is radically honest for yourself. And for me, it's been about studying formal logic, advanced math, and making sure that I am rooting out as many cognitive biases as I can catch, and that I never have any sort of cognitive dissonance, which means that I'm lying to myself, but I won't let myself see that, and so I'm miserable. In a previous life of mine, all of 5 years ago, I wasn't allowing myself to go to accuracy because that meant that I would have to question some things that I no longer believed in. And I was using my 10-year-old process to check in and go, okay, but what do people want of me? What would they want me to do? And so I was living a life that was not authentic to me. I was living basically a lie. And so I did all sorts of terrible, horrible things to a lot of people because living a lie felt awful, right? As living a lie does, right? You feel awful when you live a lie. But Harmony was encouraging me to continue living that lie because I was making decisions based on what I thought other people wanted of me. I was making social decisions, not authentically true decisions for myself. Now, again, when Harmony's a driver, Copilot looks totally different. I'm not saying that Harmony's a bad process at all, but for me, it is not the mature choice to make. And so for me, I was living a lie and hurting people and myself in the process. When I got out of my 10-year-old and got into accuracy, that's when I was radically honest. That's when I rooted out cognitive dissonance. And that's when I became the best version of myself of my entire life. At your best, you are using your driver to interact with the world in a healthy way and consulting your co-pilot for wisdom and navigation. This pattern holds true for every personality type, and it looks different depending upon which process is occupying the driver and the co-pilot state or the places. Whatever is in your driver, your co-pilot is going to round it out. Now, I just talked about me using Harmony in a bad way as a 10-year-old, but when people have it as a driver or co-pilot, it's a beautiful process. They're using it beautifully. It's sophisticated. They're using it in a wonderful way. And especially if it's that co-pilot process and they're exercising it, they become extraordinary versions of themselves. On the flip side, I've seen people use accuracy, which is my growth state. It's the process that I need to be exercising. I've seen them use it as a 10-year-old or as a 3-year-old, which we're not really going to talk about that much in this particular webinar. But I've seen them use it as a backseat driver, and it looks awful. It's horrible. They're critical. They're self-critical. Their ability to be honest despite what people think or need, it just goes haywire on them, and then they end up being kind of jerks and assholes. So it's really important to make sure that you are using your appropriate processes as the driver and co-pilot and not relying on the 10-year-old to kind of come in and do the duty that the co-pilot process is supposed to do, because otherwise you just look like a really tall, large child. So ask yourself, are you taking the time and effort to thoughtfully and persistently develop that co-pilot process? It's one of the highest leverage things that you can do for your own personal development is focus on developing the co-pilot. And what we do in the Profiler training course is we talk about all 16 types and what the positions for the driver, the co-pilot, the 10-year-old, and the 3-year-old are. And we talk about making sure to leverage that information to ensure that the person who understands this about themselves can exercise the appropriate functions and not spend too much time in, say, the 10-year-old position, and not do things that end up causing themselves and other people to be miserable by being around them because they're behaving like a large kid. All right, so I really wanted to go into that. I really wanted to talk about that piece of it, because even if you end up not going through the Profiler Training Certification course, I still want you to be able to walk away with something that can enrich your personal life and make you a better version of yourself. But now what we're going to do is we're going to spend some time talking about the Profiler Training Certification course. So what we want to do now is we want to go into what the Profiler Training Certification course is going to look like. We want to talk about basically the fundamental components of what we'll be breaking down and going over in the course, what we'll be talking about, what you're going to learn, what you're going to be able to walk away with, as well as the tuition piece and when and where and some of the logistics. And then we're going to open it up for some questions. So why don't we get right into what you're going to take away if you go through the Profiler Training Certification course.
Yeah. So the course is divided into modules and individual sessions, and right now we have about 25 sessions that are planned. Now, as the material evolves through the course, we might add a few sessions to this as it goes, but there's going to be about 25. We have 25 plus on here because that's about how many sessions there's going to be through this. And you want to go over the details of exactly what it covers, but that's basically the structure of the course.
Yeah, and what we're going to be talking about is... it's very difficult to encapsulate all of the content that you get because there is a lot and it's very intense. Most people will say that it's a very intense course. We've called it an intensive in the past. But what we cover is those 4 fundamental aspects of personality, or what we call in the CAR model, the driver, co-pilot, 10-year-old, and 3-year-old. And we cover that for all 16 types. We also dive deep into the 8 genius styles, or what I've been referring to as cognitive functions. That's our technical name. And that all people use to process information and make decisions. Now, this is the hardwiring piece. These are how people fundamentally interact with reality, both the inner and the outer reality, and how they learn new information and make decisions. Understanding the hardwiring of the brain, a big part of that is understanding how these 8 genius styles operate and work. And we're going to do massive deep dives into each of them.
Yeah, and just so we understand what we're talking about here, we're not talking about behavior. We're talking about behavior that emerges from these 8 mental processes. This is actually what's going on like behind in the wheels, the gears of the brain. This is how your mind is working, and then all your behaviors emerge from this. So this is really key, and this is, I think, one of the distinguishing things with profiler training is getting into this level. When you understand this, you understand the language of the mind, you understand how someone's mind works if you know their personality type. So it's really a powerful tool to have.
Yeah, and like Joel mentioned, this is not just behavior. This is the underlying wiring of behavior. And so what ends up happening with a lot of people who, say, use Myers-Briggs in professional context, in coaching, or if they use it as a consultant, a lot of times we end up observing behavior because that's the kind of the shallow level that most of us have gone into Myers-Briggs, which is understandable because the deeper dive stuff is usually inaccessible to most people unless they want to dedicate a lot of time and effort to learning it. The behavior component is interesting because the same behavior can come from 2 different types for 2 different reasons. So if you're just looking at behavior, that's why a lot of people do some massive mistypes on both themselves and other people. When we heard Kelly's testimonial earlier, she said when she first started the Profiler Training Certification course, she had been mistyped. And just knowing what her type was, just being able to get it accurate was a major, massive aha for her. So being able to understand the wiring underneath the behavior is huge for both understanding yourself and other people.
For example, when Antonio was talking about that 10-year-old process, a lot of people over-identify with that 10-year-old. And so the behavior emerges from that, and oftentimes they can be mistyped because you assume that behavior coming from that 10-year-old is actually their primary or secondary process, and that may not be the case. So in profiler training, we're going to go through and show you how to identify that, the blind spots to look for, and how you can make the determination whether it's their 10-year-old or their primary, their secondary, where those processes are placed, because that's how you determine someone's type.
Yeah. And so obviously the best way to learn is to do. We talk about being obsessed with the content and doing as much as you possibly can. And so what we do is we teach you how to do what's called a live profiling session. So you get, as you go through the process of the entire event, or the entire, all sets of the modules and seminars, is you get to a point where we highly encourage you and will set you up with profiling sessions if that's what you need, which means that you can go profile people and get that hands-on learning training that almost everybody needs. And so we set you up with the questions. We set you up with what to look for. We call it, in the profiler training, all of us students call it like looking for the low-hanging fruit, looking for all of these different components, because it's really a sort of a triad of multiple different avenues to come from in order to get somebody's type accurate. And getting their type accurate is a big deal. That is where we understand ourselves on a profound level. That's where in a profiling session, when you're doing live profiling and you understand all these components to a person's type and you get their type right and you start explaining it to them and they start bawling like a baby because it's the first time they've ever been truly profoundly understood. That's the moment when you know, oh my gosh, this stuff is a game changer. It can truly, literally change somebody's life. It changed mine. And so that's one of the reasons why I love talking about it. And then I've noticed the students that have come through profiler training, a lot of them say it's a game changer. So that's what we do, is set you up with some hands-on ways to profile other people and get it accurate.
Yeah. And then after you're done with the entire course, you are eligible to become a certified profiler, meaning that you would be certified by Personality Hacker, and that would enable you certain rights and privileges. And as we develop our coaching and a lot of our training materials, well, we want to have you part of our family. We want to have you part of that, inner circle of someone who really knows their stuff. And again, there's no promises, but down the road, as this business builds, we might have opportunity for you to be a profiler here at Personality Hacker, because we might need, more people to do that going forward. So that enables you to have that eligibility to be certified as a profiler.
So the 25 plus session course goes through a series of modules. And what the modules are going to cover are what's called the 4 dichotomies. So these are the components that are sort of the tip of the iceberg pieces of Myers-Briggs. A lot of people think of them as introversion, extroversion, sensing, intuition, thinking, feeling, and judging, perceiving. But a lot of the reasons why people get their type wrong or are mistyped is because they don't actually understand how the dichotomies work. Again, they go from a behavioral component. And we talk about the wiring of the dichotomies. What is actually going on with these 4 dichotomies that makes somebody truly, say, a thinker versus a feeler?
Yeah.
We also talk about the 8 cognitive functions, or the genius styles. Now, the 8 cognitive functions are the building blocks for everybody's personality. So just like we talked about with the 4 different components in the car model, there's also 4 other cognitive functions that you will understand sort of how it operates in you, but then in particular how it's operating in all 16 of the personality types, which is something we also will be going over in this profiler training course. Now, what makes this one special as opposed to previous profiler training courses is we actually didn't dive into the 16 types as much. We mostly focused on those cognitive functions and how to understand type based on them as a building block. But this particular set of profiler training sessions is going to dive into the 16 types on a more granular level, which is kind of exciting. We're also going to talk about the 4 Kiersian temperaments and how that's a component to profiling, understanding that piece, which is a little bit of a divergent from cognitive functions. Kiersey went a different direction than others have gone with cognitive functions, so understanding that is like another way to look at type. And we're also going to talk about the defensive strategies for each type, meaning what are we doing when we're in an unhealthy space, when we are not behaving our best, when we're acting like 10-year-olds and stomping our feet, as well as some of the standard strategies that each of the types incorporate that has nothing to do with their cognitive functions, that actually has to do with their dichotomies and some of the things that they fear based on those dichotomies and some of the defensive strategies that they take.
So the entire course is divided into 2 major sections. The first section is going to go into the system and all the things we have right here on the screen and teach you the system, the intricacies of the system and the inner workings, the in and outs and all of that. And then we come to a point where we switch gears and we go into the second section, which gets more into the profiling piece. So we talk about passive and active profiling. So where you actually will observe people either, at a distance or up close and begin to passively profile them, make a guess on their personality type basically, or actively profile someone. Sit down for 45 minutes to an hour across the table with them and ask them a series of questions that will help you craft that gives you an indication of how their mental processes are working that you can then construct their personality type from and then explain it to them in real time. Sit down with them, explain how their personality works. We'll give you language how to do that. So we'll take you from start to finish, understanding the system in section 1. And then in section 2, we're going to give you the tools and the ability to sit down and live profile someone from start to finish, all the language, all the tools, all the structure for that. So you'll have everything you need at the end of the course to do this and to live profile.
So what we're going to do is it's basically going to be in this format. Okay. So we're going to have it rich media. In the past, in previous Profiler training, the previous Profiler training course, it was actually all auditory. There was like one session that had some slides because it was necessary to teach that particular session. But for the most part, there was no real rich media involved. There was no camera on us or slides. And we're going to go rich media this time. We want it to make it as high quality as possible, really high production value. We want it to be as engaging as possible, and we want it to be as easy to understand as possible. So what you're looking at right now is very much going to be the format. You're going to see me on camera, and you're going to see slides on the side that will help you walk through the content and material. And we call them go at your own pace trainings. Now, the way that we've got it set up, and we're going to go to the calendar in just a moment to talk about when it is, but the way that we're going to go about it is that everything will be recorded. So if you're unable to make it live, which some people will be, then you're going to be able to consume the content at your own pace. And that's really nice because some people like to just rip through the content as fast as possible, and other people need to go a little slow. I've known people who have gotten through the material like that, and I've known people who have taken 2 years to get their certification. So it really is a go at your own pace schedule, which is great because that's what people oftentimes need. They need it to be tailored to themselves and their life schedule and how quickly they like to consume content.
Yeah, if you've gotten your premium profile from Personality Hacker, you know what the members area looks like. And this will sit in the members area, so you'll get your username and password. You'll be able to log in. You'll be able to download the files, the video files and the audio files to your computer, and any extra materials, or you can just watch live on the cloud, and you don't have to keep the information on your computer. You'll have access to that 24 hours a day whenever you feel like you'd like to go through the material. And then there's also some area there for discussion, some question and answers, and some input below each of the sessions, so we can have some discussion around what you're learning as you go through it.
You also get membership to our private Profiler Facebook group. Now, like I said, there's been about 55 people who've gone through Profiler training, and we have an active Facebook group where people interact with each other and are with like-minded people who are trying to learn it. Some advanced students that are really great as mentors, like they kind of help guide you along the way, and other people who are at the same level as you are, and so you're kind of learning it together. And that's a nice fun perk to go into the Facebook group and go, okay, so I just found this video, what type do you think that person is, and kind of have some conversation and discussion around it. It's been very supportive. And you also, at the end of it, if you complete all of your assignments, you get a certificate of completion. And you also are eligible to qualify to become a certified profiler in the Genius system, which itself comes with a host of really cool stuff. Now, the tuition for Profiler training is $19.97, and we recognize that for some people that's no problem, and for other people that might be something that's a bit of a financial investment. So what we've done is we've split it into a payment plan for those of you who need it, and we want that payment plan to be able to match your budget. So if you're in a position right now to be able to do the whole thing up front, that's awesome. And if you're a person who needs us to work with you a little bit because this is a game changer, you want to do this, but it's going to be a chunk of change, then please work with us and we'll work with you in order to create a payment plan that is right for you. But right now what we have is we have a series of about 4 different payment plans automatically generated on the website. And so feel free to look over them, see which payment plan is right for you. And if for some reason you need to, to have something that's a little bit more tailored to you, shoot us an email and we'll work with you.
You got to remember, this is an investment for you financially and time-wise. But we are also investing in you. And so it's in our best interest to make sure that you understand and you're able to go through the material and grasp it to the full degree, because we're spending the time investing in you, and it's important to us. So we will work with you. It's part of our mission, really. We will work with you, absolutely.
It's part of our mission to make sure that this content gets out to as many people as possible, and you guys become our sneezers, right? Like, you guys become the people who take the mind virus and sneeze it out to the world, and now everybody's infected, which all sounds terrible and awful, but it's really wonderful if you think about it in terms of mission. And so we want you to have as accurate a perspective on the system as possible, because we want you to be able to give accurate information and not misinformation, of which we see so much. And so we really want to make sure that we are engaging with you on a very intimate, personal level. So do you have any questions? Now we're going to take some questions live right now. But if you have questions and you were, say, not able to make this webinar live, please feel free to shoot us any question you have at info@personalityhacker.com. if you are live right now with us and a question comes to you later, please shoot us a question at info@personalityhacker.com. But what we're going to do right now is we're going to go to the question portion and just kind of check in to see, what the questions are.
We haven't told anybody how to get this yet. If you'd like to go ahead and register,
oh, right.
profilertraining.com is right on your screen. That'll take you directly to the registration page for you to go ahead and register tonight. So profilertraining.com is how you register. But now we can get to questions.
Okay, so questions. Let's see. Is the recording going to get information later? Yes. Hey guys. It's Lakshmi. Hi, Lakshmi. Hey guys, what does it take to become a certified profiler? How do you assess if we have acquired the skills to be a certified profiler? Okay, so that's a little bit more intense. What we do is we assign you a couple passive profiling sessions, which generally what we do is we assign you a movie, and your job is to passively profile the characters in the movie that we have predetermined. We do at least a couple of these, and that's a portion of how much you've got in the system in a passive sense. And then we go through a series of intensive live profiling sessions, and we make sure that you're at a certain level of proficiency and accuracy before you can move on. So if you've got it early, if you can tell that you've got the system down, that you've been doing your assignments and homework, that you have a really good grasp, you've become obsessed with the content, which is what we recommend to almost everybody who goes through it. In the first session, you'll hear me say, get obsessed, right? Like, start passively profiling this cup of water. What is the personality type of this cup? What is the personality type of this set of, headphones? Get obsessed with it. And for people who truly throw themselves into it and get obsessed, they usually get pretty good pretty quick. So if you're at that place and we go, yes, you're awesome, you've been doing great at your passive and your live profiling sessions, that's when you qualify. You have to get to a 90 percentile. And I have a grading system where you have to get to 90 percentile of accuracy or more. If you're trying to get certified and you're missing the 90 percentile, then we just keep going. We keep working with each other. We keep doing live profiling sessions. And as you gain in proficiency, when you get to that point where you're 90% or higher, then you can get certified. So it's a bit intense, but it's definitely worth it, and it makes sure that everybody grasps the system and is the best way possible. All right, do we have any other questions in the chat room or in the question box?
Again, if you think of a question after we end, feel free to send it to info@personalityhacker.com. A question about this or any other programs, we'd be happy to answer those for you. And if you want to register, we'd love to have you a part of the program. Go over to profilertraining.com and sign up there.
Yeah.
I'd like to see you there.
Absolutely. For those of you who, maybe profiler training is not right for you right now, you don't have the time to invest in it, you don't have the finances to invest in it right now, we really want to recommend, if you haven't gotten your premium content on the assessment, that you do that. That is a big leverage tool for you as a person. We also recommend that if right now what you're looking for is not an overview of the whole system or a deep dive, rather not an overview, but an absolute deep dive into the system, we also recommend that you look at your personality, the owner's manual. We have a premium program called Your Personality, the Owner's Manual, that is a deep dive into your own specific personality type and how you operate as an individual. So if this is not what you're looking for, if you're looking for something a little bit more targeted, then we recommend going the Your Personality, the Owner's Manual direction. However, if you want to use this in coaching, in your communication business, in a business that you own, to have better relationships with the people around you, as people have mentioned, it is a game changer, all right? It is big. It is huge. It changes a lot for them. So please, 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 if you are thinking about it and you just need us to work with you a little bit, let us know and we will do that. If you think that this is right for you, we are totally here to support your decision in any way that we possibly can. So shoot us a question, shoot us an email, and engage, interact, and do so by shooting us an email at info@personalityhacker.com. All right, do we have any more that we have to talk about?
I think that's good. Thank you, everyone, for joining us on this preview webinar about the Profiler Training Certification course. My name is Joel Mark Witt.
And I'm Antonia Dodge.
We can't wait to see you in the program.